Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this one is not a science post. This one is about identifying an online shill. It is a sort of continuation of the last post on the three Naomis. So, if you want to change the opinion of a hostile audience that sees you as the other, actively attempting to persuade them can actually cause them to grow more entrenched in their undesirable opinion. Your efforts can be counterproductive. The clever way to change the opinion of a hostile group is to create a plant or a shill, a person who fits their demographic and who espouses the opinion you want them to consider. For example, you might put a strong, attractive, feminist man in a group of anti-feminists and allow him to slowly and quietly undermine their assumptions about feminism. If there is an effective thought leader that you find threatening, the fastest way to remove their power is to associate them with a crazy, threatening group that everyone hates. Even if the association is completely fake, or even if the crazy, threatening group doesn't actually even exist. This works like a charm. For example, if a physicist starts saying things you don't agree with, just misrepresent one of their opinions and compare it to that of a crackpot. Easy. If there is a pop culture icon that you can pay to get on your side, you've got a winning strategy. Take, for example, Nick Cave. Everybody loves his style. He is the definition of cool. What if he could be paid to sing songs about the evils of communism for a TV show? Just listen to the lyrics of his song Right Red Hand, used as the theme song for the show Peaky Blinders, a show about, capitalists being the good guys and communists being the bad guys. The lyrics are, "Take a little walk to the edge of town and go across the tracks where the viaduct looms, like a bird of doom, as it shifts and cracks where secrets lie in the border fires and the humming wires. Hey man, you know you're never coming back. Past the square, past the bridge, past the mills, past the stacks. On a gathering storm comes a tall, handsome man in a dusty black coat with a red right hand." That's the communist. "He'll wrap you in his arms, tell you you've been a good boy. He'll rekindle all the dreams it took you a lifetime to destroy. He'll reach deep into the hole, heal your shrinking soul, but there won't be a single thing that you can do. He's a god, he's a man, he's a ghost, he's a guru. They're whispering his name through this disappearing land, but hidden in his coat is a red right hand. Ooh, watch out for those commies, they're dangerous." This is the theme song for a TV show featuring cool, smart, and ruthless wheelers and dealers who don't fall prey to the seduction of communism. But this is a rather expensive way to achieve your social engineering result. Just look at the production values of Nick Cave's show in Copenhagen. I mean, he's practically doing story time for an audience of children. Watching the audience sing along with this song tells you that the message has been fully absorbed. They definitely got their money's worth. But it's an expensive method. One of the cheapest ways to change the opinion of a group is to create a boogeyman or a monster to draw everyone's focus. Suppose that you want to undermine feminism. You might create a fake feminist who says and does things that are absolutely absurd, giving feminists as a whole a bad image. And I think I have found one of these fake feminist boogeymen. I think she's deliberately undermining the causes she claims to support. This is why I believe that Skepchick is a hired gun, fake feminist, and her act is so transparent that I just have to out her crimes. I haven't been following her since the beginning of her career. I basically I sat down and tried to look at it from beginning to end, and all of these strange, just something was off about all of it. Her shtick is to be a loud, outspoken feminist and act like a know-it-all about science and atheism, the darlings of a certain well-educated subset of men. What she does is she parades herself before these men who tend to distrust feminists, and then we all sit back and watch those men complain about how ridiculous she is and how stupid feminists are in general. If these men are busy enough with video games and hating feminists or hating fake feminists, they'll never have a chance to develop an effective political consciousness. This is a divide and conquer technique because educated men and educated women who are often feminists because they just, want to be treated as humans, they are natural allies. But when they are divided along feminist and anti-feminist lines, they lose their power, both the men and the women. When a group is trying to maintain centralized control and prevent political consciousness from developing, this is exactly the sort of result they want. You don't want leaders to spring up in these communities and undo the work you are trying to do to engineer some desired political situation. So in the blog post linked below, I have videos to some YouTube videos featuring Skepchick and a person named Thunderfoot, and it looks like an engineered drama. I think Thunderfoot is justifiably confused about what the Skepchick is attempting to accomplish. They think she's a real feminist, but they don't understand that she is not aligned with a party, liberalism, or with feminism. She is a shill aligned with centralized control. So what I think is that Skepchick is posing as a feminist while undermining feminist issues by playing the role of the crazy know-it-all feminist and highlighting the behavior of subsets of feminists which are open to ridicule. And some of these feminist subsets are completely invented. This is very similar to what was done with a woman named Germaine Greer in the 1970s. Instead of supporting the sort of feminist icon with whom all women could identify, the powers that be, who don't like feminism, elevated and disseminated the extremist ideas of Germaine Greer, causing many women to refuse to identify as feminists, effectively neutralizing their power. I think that Skepchick is a cynical effort to replicate this sort of subversion. Consider another group of people that could threaten the status quo of centralized control. What if poor black people and poor white people were in the same party? that would lead to some serious political changes. And the last thing that the powers that be want is rapid change, because it's harder for them to micromanage things. They only want the populists to think that they are getting what they want. That is why a think tank decided that Candace Owens was a threat to the status quo, and they went after her on several levels. First, there was a congressional hearing in which a couple of WASPs tried to twist her words and affiliations in ways that was frankly transparently misleading. Thankfully, she was clever enough to shut that down. But they had tried, the WASPs, to associate her with an extremist in a way that was completely dishonest. She had nothing to do with that extremist. And I have links to videos about that. If I try to simplify what I understand of where Candace was coming from, I'd use another clip, but this one was from Saturday Night Live, in which poor white folk find that they have a lot in common with poor black folk. And where they find that by drawing attention to the worst people in each group, the media ensures that the two groups will never merge, even though they are natural political allies. Just as Trump courted and hurt farmers by starting a trade war, Candace sees that Democrats like Clinton courted and screwed black people, quite literally in some cases. It seems to me by scaling back welfare and there was a big, if you don't remember the 90s, there was a big effort to force people to re-enter the workforce, often poor mothers. And it seems to me that Candace is seeking representation, better representation politically, by joining a group that is aligned with the values of her class. Historically, class warfare is carried out through a divide and conquer approach, as in poor black people line up with the Democrats and poor white people line up with the Republicans. Candace wanted change, and one way to do that is to lead a mass political exodus and create new parties that are organized along class lines instead of cultural or racial lines. But class warfare is a losing battle because those who favor centralized control of the status quo know how to shut that disruption down. Candace's firebrand rhetoric has been neutralized through giving her a fairy tale marriage to an upper-class British man. This will turn her into a happy little mum and prevent her from fomenting revolution. The powers that be usually tend to get their way. But when they do this, they prevent society from reorganizing itself on the micro scale, and that creates built-up tension in the system, which eventually tends to snap in ways they can't control. So by trying to control things, you end up with things like stock market crashes. But if you don't try to control them, you may end up with a more gradual ebb and flow of things. Meanwhile, think tanks make sure that Candace's firebrand brand is dead by getting online influencers like Skepchick to repeat the talking points that were used against her. So here again, I see this Skepchick acting as a hired gun for centralized control. I mean, when I look at her posts, there are so many smear campaigns And I think that if you see an online influencer and every second post is a smear campaign that some dark PR firm is getting paid to execute, my guess is she's probably a shill. So this skeptic is the same person who was engaged in a smear campaign against Naomi Wolf. It was an outspoken fake feminist taking down and disparaging a real feminist. That's just, it's a suspicious sort of behavior. This skeptic has been on the internet for about a decade. She started building a public profile by attending atheism, feminist, and scientific events, claiming to be an atheist, feminist, scientist skeptic, all while subtly undermining each of the three causes. For example, she would attend an atheism conference and raise a fuss about the sexism of atheists, or she would promote the slander of a guy who was publicly humiliated by people who went online and said that his behavior was creepy. She would, in another incident with regard to science, she would say how much she loves science and hates the uncomfortably accurate parody of scientific culture that is Scientology. But then she would publicly undermine public scientist Neil deGrasse Tyson for what seemed like no reason whatsoever. Was she pulling rank on him? Maybe he made someone mad. He has since been tarred and feathered with the charge of sexual scumbaggery. She also, despite her claims to be a big science supporter, she ran a piece undermining Carl Sagan. This is very odd. And if you look at her history, she has no experience in the scientific community itself. In fact, she didn't even major in science in college. It's all very weird. Regarding her claim to be a feminist, she often will trumpet an innocuous feminist theme, but then spend most of her time making fun of how stupid some imaginary radical subset of feminists are. I mean, one of them was called a TERF, and I had to look up what TERFs were. It seemed that the feminist boogeyman she was trying to draw attention to was called a trans-excluding radical feminist. I mean, do these people even exist in significant quantities? I doubt it. A good technique to discredit a group, feminists in this case, is to find some tiny, ridiculous minority and showcase their behavior. If you can pit marginalized groups against one another, so much the better. The fact that this supposedly feminist skeptic is engaging in these tactics makes me suspicious of who is paying her. So she seems like a shill, I've already said this several times, but especially when she is running PR against a prominent AIDS charity that refused to promote and sell a type of medication that many experts believe would be counterproductive. I think this is a clue as to who might be paying her. So, to me, I think hired guns, I think that hired guns like Skepchick will take money from anyone, and the purpose of that anyone is often nonpartisan. Their purpose is sometimes corporate, as in the case of the AIDS pharmaceutical company, and sometimes the purpose is centralized political control. People like Skepchick may think of their work as keeping the peace, but the true purpose seems to be control and maintaining the status quo. One of the ways to maintain control is to constantly defuse the power of minority voices like those of religious thought leaders, scientific thought leaders, advocates for Black people, or feminists by dividing them from their natural allies. Anyone who is unhappy is going to be told to shut up in one way or another. That is how you keep the peace. This is something people need to be aware of because the internet has made it possible for centralized control of our hearts and minds to be implemented on an unimaginable scale. It is now possible to silence dissenters with the push of a button. And I don't think this is good because dissenters play an important role in keeping culture grounded and humane. Without dissenters, George Orwell's vision of 1984 has come to life. In my personal experience, many parts of the internet have already assumed an Orwellian tone, with thought police represented by millennial inquisitors or moderators. When I visited Reddit and made a few science posts based on content which had been very popular on Quora, a place frequented by quite educated people, I was banned from 5 different forums within a week for making fake news after making only a couple of posts in each forum. I had written a very well-researched article on the issue of plagiarism and Amazon, and I posted that in the tech forum, and I was immediately banned. Have I been blacklisted? So I hadn't posted anything off topic, and I was an expert in the topics on which I posted or commented in science and technology, but these millennial moderators couldn't understand what I was trying to teach them something, and they banned me for being a crackpot. Either that, or they just saw my name on the list and said, this person gets immediately banned. When Reddit moderators are excluding people with PhDs and 20 years of scientific work experience from participating in an educational science forum, calling them crackpots or fake news, I mean, we have some dark times. Not all of the biased programming that our media creates is bad, of course. I think of Fred Rogers' non-denominational spiritual and emotional guidance for children, produced back when I was a kid. You know, I look at the material he produced and think he might someday be credited with preventing a social collapse in the US when people who saw his programs as children remember to be a good neighbor and come out to fix all of the things that were broken. The sort of song he sang about, it's you I like. It's not the way you comb your hair. It's not the colorful clothes you wear. It's you I like. When people remember things like that, it just sort of fixes everything. And when the people who want to control everyone and keep them purchasing more and more and more and more, keep trying to push the same agenda, eventually the system will kind of, the gears slip and then they get locked and people just quit. They just step out. So I think that the system will eventually self-correct. It's just a bit uncomfortable when these corrections are abrupt rather than gradual. So I think these people who are trying to control things need to just chill out a bit and let some of the more natural, slower correction mechanisms take place and heal things. You can't control everything forever. Thank you for watching. Until next time, please tune in for my next video. It'll be on something a bit different than this.